So many of the crises we see are due to a lack of education, especially for women and children. In America, we take it for granted that everyone is entitled to an education. In many countries, only the rich get to be educated, and the poor stay trapped in an unending cycle of poverty. Working to end this inequality sows seeds of worth and value into those the world has forgotten. Jeremiah Carlson, the lead singer of the worship band The Never Claim, has partnered with an organization called One Child Matters, a child sponsorship ministry that focuses on holistic child development.
I think educational inequality in a nutshell is basically the lack of resources for people to get a proper education. Like things that we take for granted here in America, like having a public education system where, if you can't afford a ride to school, you can get on a bus and go there. There's all these different resources. It's really the lack of the resources in order for children to receive a basic education. So if the family can't even afford food, a lot of times what will happen is the children will have to work to help provide food for the families. Even if the governments provide public education, these families can't afford the basic things. Most of the countries actually have fees that go along with the public education, and most of the time these families can't even afford those fees. And so rather than spending money, they utilize the children in a working way to help bring in income to support the family. I think education is at the epicenter of what ethics are and what morals are and why we should do the right things versus the wrong things. So for example, pollution. If children aren't raised in a setting where they're taught, hey, it's not proper for you to throw your garbage on the ground after you're done eating something, then they're not going to know any better. And so the result is, in most of these impoverished countries, is there's trash littered all over the streets. A lot of times in human trafficking, the predators will really prey on poor communities where people are more uneducated because they haven't been educated to watch for the red flags. So when a predator comes and says, hey, we have a job for your child, and it's going to pay a lot of money, but we got to take them out of your home in order to do that. They can't see the signs or the tactics that these predators use in order to kidnap, essentially kidnap these children into human trafficking. In some of these societies where women and children are seen as less than second-class citizens, they're just not given the same opportunities to proper education. I think some of the negative manifestations, some of the consequences of educational inequality, when people aren't able to get just pretty much a basic education, is the lack of having any sort of hope for there being a greater future for themselves. If they don't know how to read and write, and by society standards, you have to cross this kind of threshold of education before you have any sort of prospect of having a better future. In let's say like a neighborhood where you're raised and all you know is poverty, it's hard for you to get out of that mentality that this is just my lot in life, that what my father is doing, let's say if my father is a rice farmer, or my mother, she knits clothes and literally makes pennies to help us survive. This is going to be my lot in life. I'm going to follow in their footsteps. And if it's, it's hard enough if it's just the immediate family, but if it's your entire community, it's really hard to break out of those cycles, that lack of vision.
Then children were brought to him, that he might lay his hands on them and pray. The disciples rebuked the people, but Jesus said, "Let the little children come to me, and do not hinder them, for to such belongs the kingdom of heaven."
So when you go back to Scripture, you see Jesus constantly calling out value in people that society had deemed, unvaluable. And I think that truly is at the heart of the gospel. It's the people that feel like nobodies are usually the most utilized or chosen people by God. And I believe if we can wrap our mind around that, we can begin to sow value and identity into women and children, not just women and children, but just people generally in society that maybe don't have access to some of these practical needs like education. We can make them feel valued by providing resources for them. That can change a community, which then can change a city, which then could change a country. I'll use Nicaragua, for example, because I've been really involved in Nicaragua. Our best bet is to empower and resource and help educate the natives and the locals there, because they speak the language, they know the culture, they know the people. That's one way I think that we can start. The problem is you don't get immediate results by doing that. And especially if you begin to sow into the lives of children. Let's say if you started, sowing into the life of a Nicaraguan child at 3 years old, and you provide some sort of opportunity for them to have access to a basic education, basic health, basic nutrition, it takes a long time for that to pay off. And in this fast food society that we live in, where we want to see instant change, like, hey, I gave $30, what's the result? Actually we should be thinking like, how can we sow not just $30, but how can we sow our entire lives and the abundance that God has given us here to help resource, one child at a time or one woman at a time or one person at a time in some of these countries, where if we're patient, and especially if we're sowing into the next generation, the lives of children, we're going to see God do a dramatic shift in their worldview and their culture. If they start at 3, 20 years from then, you'll see dramatic payoff. I began my journey working with this organization called One Child Matters about 5 years ago through the band that I play in. And basically we just started off by presenting at our concerts, the opportunity to sponsor these children in developing countries. And it kind of went from there to eventually we got the chance to travel to Honduras was the country that we traveled to, and we got to see firsthand what the organization was doing. But what was so beautiful to me about what they were doing was that they launched what they call child development centers in local churches. And so they empowered the local church to do the work of the kingdom in their communities, which I thought was a super rare model to do ministry. Not to harp on any other sort of organizations out there, but I believe that the local church, if empowered and resourced and if done the right way, could and should be the best way to change communities. I just believe it's more of a holistic approach to changing communities. So one of the most powerful experiences that I've ever had in regards to traveling, cross-culturally in developing countries was on this trip to Honduras I took with One Child Matters. And we got to visit some of the projects that they were doing, the work in the churches, but then we actually got to go to some of the homes of the children in those projects. And there was one girl's house that we went to, basically 2 rooms, dirt floors. I think they had 2 beds, and she shared a bed with 2 of her siblings. And as soon as we got there, she immediately was like so excited to show us like her most prized possession, almost like, how kids get new things for Christmas. Like, if I go to my brother's home and my nephew or niece says, Uncle Jeremiah, look what I got, and they run and they bring down their Game Boy or whatever, whatever's current, the cool new thing. It was like that sort of thing. This girl was like, I want to show you the most important thing that I have. And so we were really just excited to see. And she literally took us to by her bed and pulled out the shoebox from under her bed, opened it up, and inside of the shoebox she pulled out letters from her sponsor parents from America. And she literally began to rub the letters on her face as if they were treasure, to her. And the reason why that impacted me so tremendously was because I've been a sponsor to children in different organizations for years. And I never realized how profoundly of an impact these simple letters are when you write to these children and you say things like, you're worth something to Jesus, you're so valuable to him, He's got a plan and a future for your life. You don't realize that these words that you speak through these letters actually change their lives. And I think there's no better way as a Westerner to truly invest in a country than to look at the natives and to say, how are we going to empower them to reach their people, their country, because they know how to do it best. I think if that was the general consensus by the mission community, I think we would see a lot of kingdom fruit.